On October 5, 2012, two 18-year-olds hailing from the regional municipality of Durham decided to make an impromptu video on the bus about how to make a Nintendo franchise hardcore. This was the result of that conversation.
I just want to ask you a question. How do you make a Nintendo franchise hardcore? How do you do that?
How do you make a Nintendo franchise hardcore?
Yeah, how do you do that?
How about you set it in this deep, dark, bleak setting with a lot of brown color everywhere? Big cities under attack, red sky, giant monsters falling down from said sky, and how about have the Nintendo characters like Mario, Donkey Kong, Kirby, Link, Pikachu, Pitch, or any of those Nintendo guys, and you give them a huge arsenal of deadly weapons like lasers, miniguns, machine guns.
What is up, DPN Nation? I am your host, James Millay. Let's get right into the news. The internet documenting extraordinaires at Third Echo and 18th Entertainment have decided to make a video about the history of one of the internet's most controversial figures, Anita Sarkeesian. For those of you that don't know, Anita Sarkeesian was a feminist pop culture critic that rose to infamy when she decided to launch a Kickstarter campaign for a series that would shine a critical lens on the sexist and misogynistic tropes of female video game characters. It turns out that some gamers didn't like this idea and decided to let her know about it in the form of endless video critiques, death threats, rape threats, bomb threats, and an avalanche of harassment that was completely unprecedented at the time. Her unintentional ability to rile some gamers up has proven to be just as effective as Lin Loud Sr.'s sperm. In the eyes of some gamers, she is seen as a villain that wanted to destroy the video game industry so she could reshape it to suit her own worldview and ideology, or to be more technically accurate, she was the after effect that was caused by the fact that video games were now seen as a legitimate art form. To others, she is a hero that bravely challenged the status quo by criticizing the way female video game characters were being portrayed, even though it came at the cost of her being able to live her life as a normal person. Everybody and their mother has had an opinion about Anita in one way or another over the last 12 years. Some people defended her while others made a career out of obsessively hating her and everything that she stood for. Where is Anita Sarkeesian? Who is Anita Sarkeesian? And most importantly, why is Anita Sarkeesian? How did a Canadian feminist pop culture critic become the symbol of modern social justice and feminism? And why did some members of the gaming community go out of their way to try and ruin her life and force her out of the community? If you want to know the answers to these questions, my good friend the Young Hero has put together an extensive presentation detailing the history of one of the most infamous internet personalities of all time. DPN News is proud to present to you the complicated history of Miss Tropes vs. Women in Video Games herself, Anita Sarkeesian. Anita Sarkeesian was born in 1983 in Canada and grew up outside Toronto. Her parents were Iraqi Armenians who immigrated to Canada in the 1970s. Anita would move to California, where she received a bachelor's degree in communication studies from California State University Northridge in 2007, and in 2010 she would receive a master's degree in social and political thought from York University. In 2009, Anita would found the non-profit organization Feminist Frequency. She created a YouTube channel for the organization on February 14th, and just a few months later she would publish her very first video, where she criticized the Joss Whedon show Dollhouse for getting renewed by Fox, while Terminator The Sarah Connor Chronicles got cancelled. This short video blog would provide a glimpse into what would eventually become Tropes vs. Women in Video Games.
I just found out that Dollhouse is being renewed by Fox for another season. It's a Joss Whedon TV show, so I wanted to give it a chance when it first started. Dollhouse is a show about a bunch of people who get their brains wiped, and then new personalities and experiences and memories get put into their heads, and they can exist as that person for X amount of time. And they get hired out by clients to perform various tasks. Most of the engagements are men trying to fulfill a fantasy. Dollhouse is really a glorified brothel. Dollhouse is really misogynistic. I don't know what other word to describe it as. There's a big issue that hasn't really been raised about whether this is rape or not. It's been talked about online a little bit, but the show hasn't dealt with this issue at all. So they sign these contracts saying that they'll be in the dollhouse for X amount of years, and their conscious mind isn't around, so they can't consent to every single engagement that they go on. Now, if you can't consent, then that would be rape, right? In Dollhouse, we're, as the viewer, supposed to condemn the dollhouse. We're not supposed to like it. We're supposed to think it's morally and ethically wrong to do these things to these people. Yet, we identify with all of the characters in the dollhouse. So, Boyd, the handler, you think he's pretty cool because he seems to have issues with what's going on, yet he still continues to work there. The woman who runs the place, towards the end of the season, we start to get more of an emotional grasp on her, and her character becomes a little more complicated. So we become even more entrenched in who she is and not hating her. Topher, the crazy scientist, you totally think he's funny and witty and smart and goofy, and you don't really take him too seriously. If we're not supposed to like Dollhouse, which I think we're not supposed to, then why are we sympathetic with all of the characters inside of the dollhouse? Joss Whedon on Whedonesque.com was quoted as saying that part of the pitch to renew for a second season was that they were going to go in the direction of the season finale. I think we have enough crazy serial killing, murdering men on television that we don't need to add to the repertoire with Dollhouse. The season finale was just cover my ears, cover my eyes. I didn't want to watch a single other episode of Dollhouse after that. It was just so grotesquely violent. It was unnecessary. It's this crazy, maniacal guy who was damaged by the dollhouse, which we're sympathetic to, right? Doing all these crazy things, so now he becomes the enemy, and the dollhouse is kind of in that gray middle zone area. This news is troubling in that I really didn't want Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles to get canceled. I thought it was a really good show. Felt like the storyline and the characters were really complex. They made complicated relationships between each other, and the characters evolved in very interesting ways that I thought could grow over another couple of seasons.
In 2011, Anita would partner with Bitch Media to produce a 6-episode miniseries that critically analyzed the sexist and misogynistic tropes of female characters in movies and television. It was called Tropes vs. Women.
You've probably guessed by now that this trope was named after the only female Smurf in all of Smurfville. Once upon a time, the Smurfs were a harmonious, all-dude miniature civilization comprised entirely of good-natured little blue dudes, living out their cooperative dude existence somewhere deep in their dude forest utopia. We've got lazy, grouchy, jokey, brainy, Baby and Papa Smurf and all their Smurf buddies living out their Smurfy existence free from any of those meddling, divisive, controlling, manipulative, mean women folk. But one day the evil wizard Gargamel decided on a devilish plan to sabotage Smurfdom. And how will he do that? Yes, that's right, by creating a female Smurf.
That's it. I'll get them through their hearts. I will send them a Smurfette.
So Gargamel sent in Smurfette to cause divisions between the lovable blue creatures so he can capture and eat their tender blue flesh in a nice honey lemon sauce. Long story short, love and understanding won out when Papa Smurf worked some Smurf magic and transformed Gargamel's imposter into a real live Smurf girl. Sexy blonde hair, high heels, and all.
By this point, Anita had carved out a decently sizable niche for herself by critically analyzing media from a feminist perspective. Anita was able to take a complex belief like feminism and made it easily digestible to a wider audience. Her videos were short, simple, straight to the point, and her critiques were surface level at best. Her early video blogs and the 6 episodes of Tropes vs. Women were not incredibly complex deep dives about feminist ideas, but they didn't need to be because her goal from the very beginning was to make feminism easy to engage with in a more accessible way because she felt it was trapped in academic and politically radical spaces. It's also important to note that she doesn't present herself in a way that is hyperbolic, over the top, radical, condescending, or controversial. She spoke to the audience like a normal person, and the tone that she used when she made her critiques was about as dry and inoffensive as you could possibly imagine. Anita was not seen as a divisive and controversial figure, and that's because she was a complete unknown to the general internet populace, but that would all change in 2012 when Anita made a fateful decision that would change her life and her career forever. She decided to expand her Tropes vs. Women series into the world of video games, and on May 17, 2012, she would officially launch the Kickstarter campaign for Tropes vs. Women in video games. Anita originally asked for a modest $6,000 to produce 5 episodes. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Why the hell would anyone want to pay for something they could already get for free? Well, as it turned out, a lot of people wanted to give Anita their money because she surpassed her $6,000 goal in just 24 hours. And when the campaign closed on June 16, 2012, she raised an astonishing $158,922. Due to the huge amount of money that she received, Anita would expand the series from 5 episodes to 12. No matter how you slice it, the Kickstarter campaign for Tropes vs. Women in video games was an unquestionable success. But that doesn't mean that everyone was on board with it. To say that some gamers didn't like the idea of this series would be like saying winters in Canada are extremely cold. Anita would be subjected to an unbelievable amount of harassment. Her Wikipedia page was vandalized, she was doxxed and her personal information was released online, her website was DDoSed, and she received a ton of hate comments on her YouTube videos, which eventually forced her to delete comments and ratings on all of her videos. If all of that wasn't bad enough, a 25-year-old Newgrounds user hailing from Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, by the name of Bendolin Spur, made a game called Beat Up Anita Sarkeesian, where players could beat up Anita's face until it was bruised and bloodied. Ben admitted that he made the game to express his distaste for what she was doing in a way that she would listen. While the game no longer exists, its description on Newgrounds still does. Anita Sarkeesian has not only scammed thousands of people out of over $160,000, but also uses the excuse that she is a woman to get away with whatever she damn well pleases. Any form of constructive criticism, even from fellow women, is either ignored or labeled to be sexist against her. She claims to want gender equality in video games, but in reality, she just wants to use the fact that she was born with a vagina to get free money and sympathy from everyone who crosses her path. Toronto feminist Stephanie Guthrie came to Anita's defense and called out Bendolin publicly on Twitter and warned potential employers not to hire him. She received her own share of death threats as a result, and these particular threats were so vicious that she was forced to file a police report. Anita would come to Stephanie's defense by giving a statement to the website Toronto Standard, where she condemned online harassment against women. After months of scrutiny, anticipation, harassment, and hysteria, Anita would finally release the first episode of Tropes vs. Women in video games, titled Damsel in Distress Part 1, on March 7th, 2013.
Let's start with a story of a game that no one ever got to play. Back in 1999, game developer Rare was hard at work on a new original title for the Nintendo 64 called Dinosaur Planet. The game was to star a 16-year-old hero named Crystal as one of 2 playable protagonists. She was tasked with traveling through time, fighting prehistoric monsters with her magical staff, and saving the world. She was strong, she was capable, and she was heroic.
And who might you be, animal girl?
My name is Crystal.
Pretty cool, right? Well, it would have been, except the game never got released. As development on the project neared completion, legendary game designer Shigeru Miyamoto joked about how he thought it should be the 3rd installment in his Star Fox franchise instead. Over the next 2 years, he and Nintendo did just that. They rewrote and redesigned the game and released it as Star Fox Adventures for the GameCube in 2002. In this revamped version, the would-be protagonist Crystal has been transformed into a damsel in distress and spends the vast majority of the game trapped inside a crystal prison, waiting to be rescued by the new hero Fox McCloud. The in-game action sequences that were originally built for Crystal were converted to feature Fox instead. Crystal is given a skimpier, more sexualized outfit.
Wow, she's beautiful. What am I doing?
And yes, that is cheesy saxophone music playing to make sure it's crystal clear that she is now an object of desire, even while in suspended animation. To add insult to injury, Fox is now using her magical staff to fight his way through the game to save her. The tale of how Crystal went from protagonist of her own epic adventure to the passive victim in someone else's game illustrates how the damsel in distress trope disempowers female characters and robs them of the chance to be heroes in their own right.
The video was a massive success, and it would go on to receive over 3.4 million views in its lifetime. In the span of nearly a year, Anita went from an irrelevant nobody to one of the most famous names on the internet. The success of this episode and the series in general allowed her message to be spread far wider than it had before. On the other hand, it also made her a target of angry gamers that didn't like the fact that an outsider was criticizing a medium that they loved with every fiber of their being. Anita had already been painted as the villain that was going to single-handedly destroy a multi-billion-dollar industry and infect it with social justice and feminism, and in their eyes, she needed to be stopped by any means necessary. The hate and vitriol Anita received for making this series has been well documented over the years, but there is one thing that she was subjected to that hasn't, and that's the fact that she was falsely flagged. On May 28th, 2013, a YouTuber by the name of Mundane Matt posted a tweet where he publicly encouraged people to falsely flag the first 2 installments of Tropes vs. Women in Video Games. Damsel in Distress Part 2 was released on the exact same day he made this tweet. If YouTube had determined that there was a good enough reason for these videos to be removed, Anita would have gotten 2 strikes on her account, and once an account gets 3 strikes, it is permanently deleted. When someone called Matt out for doing this, he proclaimed that he was a troll and that he thought it was funny to rile people up. The biggest reason why this incident didn't gain more traction is because Mundane Matt was a nobody. That would change a year later when he was the victim of a false DMCA claim by Depression Quest creator Zoe Quinn, and you'll be proud to know that he never falsely flagged anyone ever again. Another thing Anita's detractors did to express their displeasure was to chip away at her credibility. Anita publicly said that she loved video games and was a fan of them, even though she had admitted 2 years earlier that she wasn't a fan of video games.
How do you feel about video games?
I still love them. I think games are really where we're going.
Video games are so interesting and engaging and interactive. I'm a gamer and I enjoy games. I love games. I'm a fan of games.
In short, I've been playing games for most of my life.
The reason it's bordering between remix and bidding is because it has the format of bidding. It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games. So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this.
A lot of people thought that this made Anita look hypocritical, and it's not hard to see why. She admitted that she wasn't a fan of video games, only to turn around and gush to anybody who would listen that she loved video games. This shocking revelation was not a good look for Anita's public image, and it made gamers and those that were against social justice and feminism hate her even more than they already did, and it further solidified their belief that Anita was a fake gamer and a grifter that was only in it for the money. Anita's infamy grew even stronger when she received the Ambassador Award at the 2014 Game Developers' Choice Awards. One anonymous individual took their hatred of Anita a little bit too far, and decided to express their displeasure about Anita receiving the award by threatening to bomb the Moscone Center, which is where the event was being held. A bomb will be detonated at the Game Developers' Choice Awards ceremony tonight unless Anita Sarkeesian's Ambassador Award is revoked. We estimate the bomb bomb will kill at least a dozen people and injure dozens more. It would be in your best interest to accept our simple request. This is not a joke, you have been warned. The San Francisco Police Department's EOD division swept the premises with bomb-sniffing dogs and found nothing. The event would proceed without incident and Anita received her award.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm incredibly surprised to be receiving this award and super honored. This is the first time the GDC Ambassador Award has been given to a woman. So in light of that, I'd first like to thank all the women who have been diligently working to create positive change in the gaming industry. You've all been such a huge inspiration to me. I'm sure by now we're all familiar with the mantra that video games are just fun entertainment, so don't take them so seriously. Obviously, games can be fun and are often entertaining, but they are much, much more than that. Like many of you in this room, I do take games very seriously. My Tropes vs. Women in Video Games project was born out of a desire to do exactly that, to take gaming seriously. Seriously as an art form with an almost limitless potential to tell immersive stories. Seriously as the fastest growing form of mass media entertainment. Seriously as a medium with a massive cultural and social impact on people's lives all around the world. And of course, seriously as a medium that has demonstrated an unfortunate pattern of representing women in less than positive ways over the years. The gaming industry's influence in our society is enormous, and as game developers, you're in the position to push the medium forward. You can disrupt the formula, break the mold, and challenge the status quo. You can leave behind the old regressive sexist representations and instead create interactive experiences that portray women as capable, complex, and inspirational. This challenge is both an incredible opportunity and a serious responsibility. I know that many of you are ready and willing to step up to take that challenge and make gaming a more inclusive space for people of all genders. I'm honored to be a small part of that change, and I'm excited to see where we go from here. Thank you so much for this.
The harassment surrounding Anita would be taken to another level when she was forced to flee her own home after death threats were made against her and her family. These threats were so bad that Anita filed a police report. The San Francisco Police Department forwarded the information to the FBI so they could investigate. Anita posted a tweet over an hour later letting everyone know that she was okay and was adamant that the harassment of women in tech had to stop. These threats were made on August 26, 2014, which coincidentally was the day after she published the 4th episode of Tropes vs. Women in Video Games, titled Women as Background Decoration Part 2, which was unfortunately right in the middle of the Gamergate scandal. Anita was unfortunately dragged into this mess because of Gamergate's hatred of Zoe Quinn and women in gaming in general. If you want to know the full story behind Gamergate, I already made an entire video about it, so please feel free to check it out when you're done watching this one. On October 14th, 2014, Anita was forced to cancel a talk at Utah State University because the police wouldn't take steps to prevent concealed firearms from being at the event. An anonymous individual emailed USU earlier that day and threatened to commit the deadliest school shooting in American history if Anita was allowed to speak. In my Gamergate video, I said that this individual went by the alias of Mark Lepine. That was incorrect. They merely mentioned Mark Lepine. For those of you that don't know, Mark Lepine was a man that infamously murdered 14 women in the 1989 École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal because he believed that he was fighting feminism. 3 other threats that were made against Anita were revealed as part of the FBI's investigation of Gamergate. One anonymous individual vowed to kill every single fucking feminist bitch that was going going to be in the auditorium where Anita planned to speak, and that they would laugh as rivers of feminist blood flowed through the room, and that they would see who the true alpha male was. And then there were two others that just threatened to blow up the Taggart Student Center auditorium. Anita spoke out against these threats in a series of tweets. Requested pat-downs or metal detectors after mass shoot-in threat, but because of Utah's open carry laws, police wouldn't do firearm searches. At this point, supporting Gamergate is implicitly supporting the harassment of women in the gaming industry. I'm safe. I will continue my work. I will continue speaking out. The whole game industry must stand up against the harassment of women. USU determined that these threats were not credible, and no further action was taken. On October 29, 2014, Anita appeared on an episode of The Colbert Report to talk about Gamergate, and by the end she got him to admit that he was a feminist. You'll be proud to know that everyone liked this appearance, and it did not cause any controversy whatsoever. Nobody was mad, and most importantly, nobody made videos responding to it for the sole purpose of hating on her. As time went on, the internet kept finding more reasons to hate Anita. She misrepresented the game Hitman Absolution by claiming that the game rewarded players for attacking strippers. Nate Talks to You refuted this claim in his video titled 8 Anita Sarkeesian Fails.
So in many of the titles we've been discussing, the game makers have set up a series of possible scenarios involving vulnerable, eroticized female characters. Players are then invited to explore and exploit those situations during their playthrough. The player cannot help but treat these female bodies as things to be acted upon, because they were designed, constructed, and placed in the environment for that singular purpose. Players are meant to derive a perverse pleasure from desecrating the bodies of unsuspecting virtual female characters. It's a rush streaming from a carefully concocted mix of sexual arousal connected to the act of controlling and punishing representations of female sexuality.
Okay, there is a lot wrong with this one, so let's begin.
The player cannot help but treat these female bodies as things to be acted upon, because they were designed, constructed, and placed in the environment for that singular purpose.
Pay attention to how Anita claims the dancers were put there for that, quote, singular purpose. This may have been a sound argument if it wasn't for the fact that you have the option to pass the dancers without laying a finger on them. This part of the game has what you might call a fork in the road. Direction A brings you near the dancers, where sure, if you wanted to, you could attack them. Or you could not hurt them and use this direction instead to evade security. Since one of the main goals of Hitman Absolution is to avoid getting caught, the latter is far more practical. And the other choice is direction B. You could subdue the guard, hide his body, and not go near the dancers at all. But instead of covering both options, Anita only chose to highlight one of them. Anita could have just as easily argued that
the player cannot help but treat these women as people to avoid. Players are meant to sneak past them in order to proceed further in the game. It's a rush streaming from the suspense of being spotted.
Which would actually make more sense because Hitman Absolution is a game that rewards you for being stealthy. For example, look at some of the trophies or achievements you can earn. This is the game giving the player motivation to be sneaky. Even the very first mission tells this to you.
During this assignment, key game elements will be highlighted. First of all, try to kill with discretion and try to remain undetected.
Also, the dancers in this game are not treated as mere objects. They have dialogue that not only gives their characters personality, but makes you feel empathy for them.
I just can't take much more of Dom. I don't know what to do.
Look, you're new here. Dom is the price of this business. Be smart. Every club has one like him. A Dom.
He wanted me to do a show in the back room. I don't do that. Well, he said if I didn't, he would do what he did to Lori last night. Or worse.
The fucker did the same thing to Amber, with a billy club instead of a hairbrush.
Who's Amber? Oh, God. Why is this happening? I mean, look outside. There are cops everywhere. And you know what? He doesn't give a flying fuck.
That's why he comps all the cops. They are not about to fuck with him when he gives them free titties every night.
I think it's sick. I mean, we're just working.
Look, be smart, be safe, and put a brave face on, or Dom will send you straight to Hawaii.
Why would that be bad?
Well, you seen the sign on the door upstairs? The one that's always locked? Believe me, it's bad.
I just saw Dom. He said if I didn't entertain his friends, I'd be going to Hawaii.
Hey. Look, you just gotta entertain his friends. Don't let them think they own you. And just think of something positive. We've all been there, honey. Luckily, they don't ask twice.
Just tell me what happens in Hawaii. I mean, it's just, you all say it's really bad. I mean, is it just like a private club? Like the back room?
Yeah, something like that. But it's not something you really want to be a member of. Just be strong, baby. Yeah, pretty girl. You show them how good you are, but just don't say yes to everything they say.
Okay. Thank you. I won't.
Poor thing.
So how can Anita say you're meant to derive some perverse pleasure from desecrating their bodies when you're more than free to go around them? The game tells you to be stealthy and rewards you for doing so, and the dancers have dialogue to make you feel bad for their situation. Anita is basing this on nothing more than conjecture. And even if you chose to attack the dancers, the game penalizes you for doing so, which Anita shows in her video. In the game Hitman, you play as, well, a hitman. You're not supposed to attack random people. You're supposed to kill your target. But playing in this manner can cost you trophies like Inconspicuous, and you also lose points for getting spotted. Now, some people have argued that when you hide the body, you get all your points back, so essentially there is no penalty. Here's the thing though, being able to recover from a penalty is not the same as there being no penalty. For example, a lot of games have health lying around for when you're injured, and some games make you heal automatically. But being able to heal from an injury is not the same as being invincible. Besides, going around taking people out puts a player at risk. After you subdue someone, you have to find a place to hide the body. And when you drag the body around, you move a lot slower, which puts you at risk of being spotted.
Oh my god. Oh, locker.
And if someone does spot you, they'll come to investigate and find the body automatically and raise the alarm. But even if, without a doubt, you were supposed to attack the dancers, how would that make the game sexist? Agent 47's motivation for killing people has nothing to do with hating women, and most of your targets in the game are men anyway. To wrap this one up, a game allowing you to do something is not the same as it encouraging you to do so.
She was also criticized for stealing footage for her videos from YouTube Let's Players without crediting them.
Throughout her series, Anita shows footage from many different video games. How does she get this footage? Well, according to her interview with UseThis.com, she records it herself with an Elgato capture card. However, investigation has shown that a lot, if not all of her footage, is actually taken from YouTube videos.
His enemies, destroying the iridium injectors that keep me alive, will stop the key from charging.
So why is Anita not recording her own gameplay? She has all the equipment for it. She was given nearly $160,000 to make this series, money that she said would go towards buying these games. And because she's a reviewer of games, you'd expect her to actually play the games that she's reviewing. I mean, can you imagine if, for example, the YouTuber JonTron was doing a review of Castlevania 2, but instead of recording his own footage, he just took it all from the angry video game nerd? The least she could have done was give the people who recorded the gameplay some kind of credit, but she didn't even do that.
And then there was this infamous clip.
everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
On September 24th, 2015, Anita and Zoe Quinn visited the United Nations to talk about online harassment. In their eyes, this was a discussion worth having because they were constantly being subjected to it on a regular basis for the work that they were doing, while their detractors saw it as them whining about the fact that people on the internet were being mean to them. If being hated on the internet was like the wanted system in Grand Theft Auto, Anita would have been at 5 stars by now. I would say that this was the 100th different reason that the internet didn't like Anita, but I honestly have no idea because I've completely lost count at this point.
Anita, with your work through Feminist Frequency, how do you interpret a multi-level approach to working on these issues?
Yeah, so Feminist Frequency is a nonprofit that I run where we look at the way women are represented in the media. And by doing this work, I have been the target for 3 years nonstop of egregious online harassment in all levels. I think it's important to recognize that harassment is, as someone had mentioned, it's not just what is legal and illegal, right? Harassment is threats of violence, but it's also the day-to-day grind of you're a liar, you suck, you know, making all of these hate videos to attack us on a regular basis, and the mobs that come from those hate videos, etc. And so, you know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about online harassment and what we can do about it. And I think something that's really important to understand is that, you know, we know this, but I think it's worth saying that sexism and misogyny did not start with the internet, right? It's been around for a long time, and feminists for decades have been challenging these male-dominated systems. So what we're seeing is that the internet is providing new ways to commit the same types of violence, right? And so understanding that this is a cultural, that we really need to see a big cultural shift in how we deal with this, and we can take note from activists that have been doing this work previously or have continued to do this work while acknowledging how technology is changing the face of current day sexism and misogyny. So creating a cultural shift, I think, it takes a great number of approaches, and we've been hearing a lot about systemic change, and that makes me really happy because I think that that's really how we have to do this. And so one of those approaches is, I think that the online social media sites and the places in which we are engaging on these large platforms really need to step up and change the way that their systems operate. So it's not enough that they simply put Band-Aids on the problem areas, that they need to completely reimagine what their systems look like in order to build sites that actively deter online harassment, that make it harder to do this. We're not going to go and convince every single person who does horrible things online to stop doing those things, but we can make systems that actively deter that kind of behavior, which would make a huge impact on the lives of me and so many other people who are being harassed online. So what we have right now is women are forced to build a fortress around themselves with the measly tools that we have online. And so we are being punished for people harassing us, and, you know, yes, period. And I think that that's a really big problem. And so we need to really think about how we create this larger cultural shift, taking into consideration society at large, taking into consideration tech platforms, taking into consideration laws, so that people, like all people, can engage online and fully participate without fear of intimidation and violence.
In March 2016, Anita announced that she was launching a crowdfunding campaign for a new video series titled Ordinary Woman Daring to Defy History. The series would be 5 episodes long and would focus on powerful women throughout history. This announcement pissed her detractors off because she was asking people for money to launch this new series when Tropes vs. Women in video games hadn't even been completed yet, which further reinforced the belief that Anita was scamming people out of their money. Ordinary Woman would be released in its entirety in 2016. While all of this was going on, Anita was putting the finishing touches on tropes versus women in video games. The series finally came to an end on April 27th, 2017 with the episode The Lady Sidekick, but it didn't feel like a series finale, and that's because Anita didn't announce at any point in this video that the series was indeed ending. It was a normal episode from start to finish. There were no goodbyes, there were no acknowledgements about the huge impact the series had made, and there was no sense of finality. It just ended without any fanfare. After 4 years, 18 episodes, and a Kickstarter campaign that raised $158,922, Tropes vs. Women in Video Games was over. Anita had completed the biggest project in her career up until this point. It took a lot longer than anyone had expected, but at long last the job was done. Anita could disappear from the spotlight and be a normal person for the first time in forever. Unfortunately, there was a certain skeptic YouTuber from the UK that decided to extend her never-ending 15 minutes of unintentional fame by quietly sitting in the front row while she was doing a panel at VidCon. What could possibly go wrong? Carl Benjamin, better known as Sargon of Akkad, made a name for himself by making a substantial number of videos criticizing Anita Sarkeesian. His obsessive interest in Anita inspired other YouTubers to make their own critiques of her work, which would eventually spawn a cottage industry of internet skeptics making videos that mocked SJWs and feminism. Anita was obviously not a fan of Sargon's videos and deemed him to be a harasser, while Sargon believed that Anita was misconstruing his criticism as harassment to make herself look like a victim. I don't think it's controversial to say that these two did not like each other, so it wasn't a surprise when all of that tension and mutual dislike finally boiled over. Sargon sat in the front row of the Woman Online panel at VidCon on June 22nd, 2017. The rest, as they say, is history.
If you Google my name on YouTube, you get shitheads like this dude who are making these dumbass videos.
Why don't we just talk?
Whatever, dude.
Exactly. That's exactly.
But it's, you know, like the fact that these dudes are making endless videos that just go after every feminist over and over and over again, I think is a part of the issue of why we have to have these conversations. We don't just get to be online. We don't just get to participate like everyone else.
I would say this incident was divisive, but that would be a lie because most people were firmly on Sargon's side, even though his tactics were extremely questionable. In the eyes of the wider internet populace, Sargon was the innocent victim that was berated for quietly sitting in the front row of a panel, while Anita was an easily triggered, overly sensitive special snowflake that couldn't take criticism and would lash out at her detractors in a public forum without provocation. Dave Cullen, who was known as Computing Forever at the time and was one of Sargon's friends, explained the strategy that he, Sargon, and several other skeptics had carefully planned out for this particular panel. We carefully organized this so that on one side of the audience we would all make up the top 3 rows. We would all be sitting there filming it. Anita spoke, and they were asking about why is it important to still have women talking about sexism or some victim bullshit in video games. He claimed that they were there to engage with Anita, and then he completely contradicted himself by saying this. We had a blast with this. It was such an adrenaline high to be there in the situation to shitpost in this trolling kind of way. He goes on to claim there was no malice in their actions and that it was playful. These comments were a small part of a Polygon article that was written about the incident. Polygon sent these comments directly to Anita, and she responded by saying this. Hearing the honesty in that comment is weirdly almost kind of validating, because of course we know it's true. We've always known it's true, that for them this is a kind of game, but they constantly deny it. They're playing for fun. For them it's a thrill to use the power they have under patriarchy to try to keep women in their place, to try to intimidate or silence women who dare to speak out and assert their humanity and their right to exist as full human beings in these spaces. They don't give a damn about the actual impact they're having on people's lives. It's a sport, an adrenaline rush, but for me and for other women who are targeted by cyber mobs, who endure ongoing campaigns of harassment, it's not fun, it's scary, it's traumatic. You have to be so far removed from the reality of what you're doing to engage in this behavior and call it playful trolling. This is harassment, pure and simple, with the goal of trying to scare and silence women who speak out against sexism in our culture. VidCon co-founder Hank Green told Anita that she had violated VidCon policy by calling Sargon out, but he acknowledged that there was a broader context behind it. He then apologized to her for not being more aware of and active in understanding the situation before the event, which resulted in her being subjected to a hostile environment that she had not signed up for. Patreon investigated Carl in the wake of this incident and had cleared him of any wrongdoing. While distasteful, and definitely not something we agree with, Sargon's content and conduct do not violate our policies. This video wouldn't be complete if I didn't mention the fact that Carl never received an apology from VidCon for the verbal abuse that he was subjected to when Anita decided to call him a garbage human. Anita would have another panel later that day and would embroil herself in another controversy when she privately scolded a YouTuber by the name of Boogie2988.
Yeah, and you get a lot of what you call the oppression Olympics, right? Like, no, I have it worse. No, I have it worse.
Yeah.
No, I have it worse.
Yeah.
How about this? The human condition fucking sucks. The world we've created is a shit show. Social media is fucking destroying all of us, and we just work on that at a base level. And maybe we don't exclude the straight white men who also could help. How about we don't exclude anybody? How about we all just work together?
Yeah.
Let's just do that.
Yeah.
And that was my goal, according to that panel. And Anita, in my closing statements, that's basically word for word what I said. And then we got off stage, and she puts her finger in my face, and she's like, I don't fucking appreciate what you fucking said up there, knowing I didn't have a chance to fucking respond. And I'm like, it was closing statements. Everybody got a chance to close. They went to you next immediately after me. I don't understand. But like what I originally told her,
But she's bullying you.
Right, she's like straight up furious.
All right. Now that this bullying,
I wouldn't call it bullying, but I mean, she's mad.
I mean,
you know?
she's got her finger in your
Right?
face, and how dare you
so
disagree with me?
I'm like, look, I have diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. I depersonalize during moments of great stress. I'm already in a lot of pain. That pain was very hard on me. You're now, got your finger in my face. We need to back off for a second, because I might say or do some stupid shit, and I don't want to do that, okay? So why don't we talk about this, right?
Boogie was one of the most beloved creators on the platform at the time, and the fact that Anita scolded him for no reason rubbed the court of public opinion the wrong way, and it gave her detractors yet another reason to hate her. Nobody knew it at the time, but this would be the last time that Anita was considered relevant to the wider internet landscape. As the years went on, she would slowly fade into complete and utter irrelevance. Her 15 minutes of fame were up, the hysteric discussion that surrounded her had ground to a halt, videos that mocked SJWs and feminists had fallen out of fashion, and the internet moved on and found new people to hate. Anita would return to the world of video games in 2019 with a 3-episode miniseries titled Queer Tropes in Video Games, which was the exact same show as Tropes vs. Women in Video Games, but for LGBTQ characters. The biggest difference between this spin-off and the original series is the fact that Anita didn't appear in it, nor did she write any of the episodes. As a matter of fact, she was behind the camera as a director. All 3 episodes were written and hosted by former GameSpot writer Carolyn Pettit. In 2022, Anita would create a series for the creator-led streaming platform Nebula titled That Time When, which was about the times when pop culture and politics collided with modern history. I'm not sure how well the series did from a viewership standpoint, because streaming services are notoriously tight-lipped about their viewership numbers, but I think it's safe to assume that the numbers were probably a lot lower than it would have been if it were released on YouTube, due to the fact that you have to pay actual money in order to access Nebula, whereas YouTube is free of charge, so you can create an account and freely criticize anyone you want for literally any reason, regardless if it's warranted or not. So it totally makes sense why Anita put this series behind a paywall. If this series had been released on YouTube, people would have responded with instant antagonism, no matter what she said or did. She would never get the benefit of the doubt because she would automatically be guilty in the court of public opinion. On August 1st, 2023, Anita announced that she would be shutting down Feminist Frequency after 14 years of operation. I'm exhausted. I know that it's not unusual for non-profits to have a life cycle shorter than a lot of people would like, but there are unique challenges when they're so entwined with an individual who has become a symbol for better and for worse. I'm hoping that it will be valuable to share the reality of the bone-deep burnout that comes from consistently saying yes to the growth of feminist frequency, often at the expense of protecting my personal boundaries and the workload of our team. While I've already said my piece about the harassment that myself and others have experienced over the years, reflecting on it now, I can express both a sense of pride that conversations about online abuse have become part of our lexicon, and a reality that it has come at the cost of my health and well-being. And so, while there has been so much value to this project and its different iterations over the years, there is also value to projects coming to an end when they can no longer be best served. The game's an online harassment hotline shut down on September 30th, 2023. While the organization as a whole shuttered earlier this year, their YouTube channel is still up at the time of writing this, but the only new content that gets posted on it these days is the Feminist Frequency Radio podcast. All of her previous media critiques, including tropes versus women in video games, remain available to this very day as a free resource for anyone to use. Since the closure of Feminist Frequency, Anita has completely disappeared from the public spotlight and has gone back to living a normal life. Nobody knows where she is or what she's currently doing, but if this photo is any indication, she's living her best life, where she's not seen as a symbol for challenging the status quo or as a villain that wanted to destroy a prestigious medium. She's just a normal person named Anita Sarkeesian, and after all of the hell that she went through in the pursuit of spreading her message to the entire world, she has more than earned the right to take a step back and be a normal person for the first time in forever. I figured we would start off this section by clearing up some of the most common misconceptions that have been made about Anita Sarkeesian over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of joke about how it was the most liberating thing that ever happened to me, and also the most frustrating for everyone around me. Because like when you start learning about systems, everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out to everyone all the time. So there's a good year of my life. There's a good year of my life where it was just I was the most obnoxious person to be around. And then you settle into it. You start to understand, like, oh, people have been living within these systems, and it was just sort of a liberating moment for me, and you learn how to pick and choose your battles and that sort of thing. But I think that that's the critical piece here, is that we have to understand this as systems. And I really like what you were saying, because that's fundamentally challenging power dynamics. It's like, we don't want equality within these oppressive systems. We want to create actual real equity. So it's not just replicating what currently exists and what power dynamics currently exist, right?
This particular clip comes from the How to Be a Feminist panel at All About Women 2015. When Anita said that everything is racist, everything is sexist, and everything is homophobic and you need to point it all out, she was referring to the fact that when she was first learning about systems, she genuinely believed that she needed to point out all of these things all of the time. But as she began to learn more about systems and her ideas gradually evolved, she realized that she no longer needed to have this sort of mentality. A lot of YouTubers have used this clip over the years to paint Anita as a professional victim, but they conveniently leave out the fact that Anita was making fun of herself for having this sort of belief, and that she referred to herself as an obnoxious person to be around for about a year.
The reason it's bordering between remix and vidding is because it has the format of vidding. It's a soundtrack of one song, except I'm doing video games. So it's not exactly a fandom. I'm not a fan of video games. I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this.
The reason why Anita said that she wasn't a big fan of video games is because she bought into the bogus myth that you had to be playing games like Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, or God of War in order to be considered a real gamer. To put it simply, Anita wasn't a big fan of video games because she felt it was the modern equivalent of that old Berenstain Bears book. To be honest, she should have been a lot more clear in terms of what she actually meant, sense when she said that she wasn't a big fan of video games, because if you strip away all of the context, it doesn't paint Anita in a particularly good light. And what gets lost in all of the shuffle is the other big reason why she said that she wasn't a big fan of video games. In her opinion, she felt that there were way too many games being made with men at the forefront as lead characters, and that there were not enough games being made with women in mind. She visually illustrated this massive discrepancy by producing a video remix that was set to Flight of the Conchord's Too Many Dicks that had various clips of video games, and all of them had men as the lead character.
There's too many dicks on the dance floor!
Too many dicks on the dance floor. Too many dicks on the dance floor.
Too many dicks.
Too many dicks on the dance floor.
Too many dicks.
Too many dicks on the dance floor.
Too many dicks.
Going to the party, sipping on Bacardi. Wanna meet a hottie, but there's Adam, Steve, and Marty. There's Billy, Todd, and Tommy. They're only from the army. The only boobs I see tonight will be made up on the dummy.
Tell the fellas, make it understood. It ain't no good if there's too much wood. Make sure you know before you go. The dance floor rojo ratio. 5 to 1 is a rodeo. Tell Steve and Mike it's time to go. Wait outside all night so far. 20 dudes in a conga line.
Too many dicks on the dance floor.
Easy to fix. Too many dicks on the dance floor.
Too many dudes with too many dicks. Too close to my shit. Too hard to meet chicks. I need better odds, more broads, less rods. I came to do battle. Skedaddle with the counter rods.
Too many men, too many boys, too many misters, not enough sisters. Too much time on too many hands. Not enough ladies, too many mans.
We are talking about Anita Sarkeesian, who has, from time to time, appeared here and there. As a brief summary of who she is, she's famous for being, well, a peddler of lies. A garbage human, perhaps. She did a Kickstarter to do a video series, never completed the series. Did another Kickstarter for another series. Didn't complete that either, did ya?
Contrary to popular belief, Anita did actually finish Tropes vs. Women in video games. As I mentioned earlier in this video, Anita initially asked for $6,000 to produce 5 episodes, which she later expanded into 12. From 2013 to 2017, she released 12 main episodes and 6 bonus episodes for a total of 18, so if anything, she actually over-delivered compared to what she originally promised. A lot of people didn't know that the series was ending because Anita didn't announce it was ending in the series finale. She instead chose to announce it on the Feminist Frequency blog and the Tropes vs. Women in Video Games Kickstarter page. Anita was also accused of being a scammer that took people's money and ran, but this is simply not true. If you go on the Tropes vs. Women in Video Games Kickstarter page, you'll find that she released a graph that showed where all of the money was going to and what it was being used for. And besides, if she had taken the money that was supposed to go to Tropes vs. Women in Video Games and had used it on herself, not only would that have been insanely unethical, it would have constituted as fraud, and she would have gotten into a lot of legal trouble, and as far as I'm aware of, that never actually happened. And as far as Ordinary Woman is concerned, it was only slated to be 5 episodes, and she released all of them in 2017. So yes, Anita did finish both Tropes vs. Women in Video Games and Ordinary Woman, and she did not scam anyone out of their money, and anybody that tells you otherwise is a goddamn liar. Earlier in the video, I mentioned the fact that Anita was criticized for misrepresenting the game Hitman Absolution by claiming that the game rewarded players for attacking strippers. She actually addressed this misconception when she spoke at a 2015 event called The Conference. Unlike the previous 3 instances where I explained why the misconception was wrong, Anita does a far better job of it in this instance than I ever could.
Okay, so the claim that I misrepresented this game is a particularly dishonest strawman argument. It originates from a 42-year-old YouTube user who, by all accounts, hasn't played the game at all, hasn't played Hitman at all, but is obsessed with ranting against feminism. His video entitled Anita Sarkeesian Busted is by far the most viewed video in the flourishing debunking feminist frequency subgenre on YouTube, which has itself turned into quite the cottage industry. His video is brimming with logical fallacies, but its popularity with male gamers does provide us with a useful example to deconstruct. So, If you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to first show you a brief clip of part of my original argument from my Women as Background Decoration miniseries. You're about to see 1.5 minutes from an hour-long analysis in which I discuss the ways in which sexual objectification is coded into game systems in many open-world or sandbox-style games. Here I'm addressing sexually objectified NPCs or non-player characters that are designed to be malleable, vulnerable, or disposable. I should note that this kind of misogynistic behavior isn't always mandatory. Often it's player-directed, but it is always implicitly encouraged. In order to understand how this works, let's take a moment to examine how video game systems operate as playgrounds for player engagement. Games ask us to play with them. Now, that may seem obvious, but bear with me. Game developers set up a series of rules, and then within those rules, we're invited to test the mechanics to see what we can do and what we can't do. We are encouraged to experiment with how the system will react or respond to our inputs, and discover which of our actions are permitted and which are not. The play comes from figuring out the boundaries and possibilities within the game space. So in many of the titles we've been discussing, the game makers have set up a series of possible scenarios involving vulnerable, eroticized female characters. Players are then invited to explore and exploit those situations during their playthrough. The player cannot help but treat these female bodies as things to be acted upon, because they were designed, constructed, and placed in the environment for that singular purpose. Players are meant to derive a perverse pleasure from desecrating the bodies of unsuspecting virtual female characters. It's a rush streaming from a carefully concocted mix of sexual arousal connected to the act of controlling and punishing representations of female sexuality. In-game consequences for these violations are trivial at best, and rarely lead to any sort of fail state or game over. So a bunch of gamers were very unhappy about my analysis and allege that my video is deliberately misleading. They claim that the game does not encourage players to attack civilians, but instead punishes players for such actions. And therefore, by showing footage of the player character killing exotic dancers, that I was deceptively trying to make the game appear sexist. Everything about this claim is false. It's common for strawman arguments like these to focus on minute details, which are then blown out of proportion in an attempt to create a scandal. If you're not familiar with these kinds of games, I'm going to get a tiny bit technical about game mechanics for a moment, so bear with me. First, in my video, the exotic dancers are not being killed, they're being pacified, which is what the game calls it when you knock someone out without killing them. The game indicates this in the top left-hand corner of the screen. Next, the game does not punish players for non-lethal pacification. The point system in Hitman Absolution functions as a way to track performance stats. It has nothing to do with success or failure of the mission. All you need to do to pass a level is to kill your intended target and get out alive. Furthermore, the game provides ways to negate minor statistical penalties. In fact, if you keep watching my playthrough, you'll notice that the 140-point pacification deduction is nullified when the unconscious bodies are hidden inside one of the many containers that the game designers have placed in each level for that purpose, meaning there is no penalty. This is really basic stuff in the Hitman series. Finally, the assertion that the game does not encourage players to attack civilians is simply incorrect. It most certainly does, both implicitly and sometimes explicitly. Hitman Absolution is what's called a stealth sandbox game. That means it's designed to be played in many different ways. For example, each level includes multiple ways to kill each target. It's essentially a playground for creative violence. In fact, the only options provided for interaction with most characters are to either murder them or subdue them. Neutralizing NPCs is a core mechanic in the Hitman series. It's often necessary in order to clear a path to objectives or prevent a character who's seen you from raising the alarm. In this stage, for example, there's a specific challenge that explicitly encourages players to knock out a stripper and drag her body out of the line of sight. This action then allows the player to hide inside the stripper cake and wait for the targets to arrive before popping out and murdering them all in slow motion. The whole point of the game is to offer a wide range of possibilities for experimentation, which is why even if you murder civilians, you don't get a game over. Saying that this game doesn't want players to interact with civilians in the only ways that are provided is like saying that Grand Theft Auto discourages players from stealing cars because sometimes they get a police wanted level for doing so in Grand Theft Auto. The developers obviously put a tremendous amount of work into designing and implementing these systems. They didn't do so with the hopes that no player would ever use them. As I said in my original video on the topic, game systems and everything in them, including sexually objectified female characters, exist to be played with. So there's absolutely no truth to the allegation that I misrepresented this game. Okay, enough of that. Those who repeat these false claims do not understand my argument, or perhaps more likely, they are just trying to pass off bad faith straw man arguments as legitimate criticism, while making no real attempt to engage with the substance of my analysis. Now, obviously, good faith, respectful, constructive criticism of women's work can be useful and valuable, but that's not what we're talking about here.
The fact that I'm sitting here today to talk to you directly about all of this because some gamers completely overreacted to a woman doing a series of video essays about the sexist and misogynistic tropes of female video game characters is absolutely insane to me. The credibility of YouTubers who were using out-of-context clips and were spreading blatant misinformation to make Anita look bad should have been called into question, and the tactics of Sargon of Akkad during the whole VidCon fiasco should have definitely been called into question, but at the time nobody cared, because Anita was universally hated by pretty much everyone on the internet. When you get labeled as a villain on the internet, everything you say and do is met with instant antagonism, and you will never get the benefit of the doubt. Anita was so hated by gamers, people who oppose social justice and feminism, and basically anyone with a pulse, that she could have made a tropes versus women in video game episode where she poured a cup of melted chocolate onto a copy of Super Mario Bros. While she snapped her fingers to make the chocolate magically disappear, and then she would snap her fingers again to make the chocolate reappear, and then she would keep doing this over and over again as a metaphor to emphasize that Princess Peach's character has no other purpose than to be kidnapped and rescued over and over again, and that she is merely a prize to be won for Mario and by extension, the player. And in this hypothetical scenario, nobody would care about what she actually said. They would probably be like, oh my gosh, this fake gamer girl doesn't have an original bone in her body. She just copied the AVGN.
Bombs away. Oh, fuck you, diarrhea fiend.
I've said my piece, now I want to hear yours. Did you like Anita? Did you not like Anita? Or were you just indifferent to her? Whatever your opinion is, please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section down below. I am extremely interested to see what you guys have to say about all of this, because Anita Sarkeesian is a very discussion-worthy topic. For those of you who made it to the end of the video, I salute you. And for those of you who are watching for the very first time and liked what you saw here, then please consider subscribing to my channel because I have many more awesome videos just like this one. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. This is ThatKidDouglas, aka The Unhero, signing out. Deuces, and until next time, remember to stay frosty and keep it weird.